Emily Thompson brushed a lock of hair out of her eyes as she descended the narrow spiral staircase into the restricted section of the university library. The air grew cooler with each step, carrying the musty scent of aged paper and forgotten tales. As the junior librarian tasked with cataloging ancient texts, Emily had spent countless hours here, yet the thrill of uncovering hidden gems among the dusty shelves never waned. Today, however, her task was more specific. Dr. Harrow, the head librarian, had asked her to verify the integrity of several manuscripts believed to date back to the Renaissance, which were to be loaned to a museum for an upcoming exhibit on medieval occult practices. The manuscripts were kept in a rarely accessed part of the archives known informally among the staff as the vault. Reaching the bottom of the staircase, Emily unlocked the heavy iron door with a key that was usually kept under strict guard. Inside, the vault was dimly lit by a series of small bulbs that cast more shadows than light, creating an atmosphere that was both eerie and awe-inspiring. She walked along the rows of ancient bookcases, her fingers trailing lightly over the leather spines of the books, feeling the impressions of gold leaf that still clung to some. Her task required her to locate and inspect 3 specific manuscripts, but as she searched, her eyes caught on an anomaly. A book that appeared out of place, its cover less worn, its size slightly larger than its neighbors. Curious, Emily pulled the mysterious volume from the shelf. It was unusually heavy, and there was no title on its spine, only a strange symbol that looked like a cross entwined with a serpent. The cover was a rich, dark leather that felt warm to the touch, as if it had been left in the sun, though such a thing was impossible here. Opening the manuscript carefully on a nearby table, Emily was immediately struck by the contents. The pages were filled with elaborate, colorful illustrations that were unlike anything she had seen in other medieval texts. They depicted astrological diagrams, mythical creatures, and detailed scenes that seemed to tell a story, though the narrative was unclear. The text was written in an unfamiliar script that twisted across the pages like the branches of a strange vine. Fascinated, Emily decided to take a few photographs with her phone, intending to ask Dr. Harrow about the manuscript later. As she snapped pictures, she noticed that the illustrations seemed to move, ever so slightly, as if alive. Shaking her head, she chalked it up to the dim lighting and her imagination. Realizing she had spent more time than intended with the mysterious book, Emily carefully returned it to its place and collected the manuscripts she had originally come for. As she locked the vault's door behind her, she couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual had just begun, a sensation that was both exhilarating and unnerving. Back in her small office, Emily uploaded the photos from her phone to her computer, zooming in on the strange script. It was then that she noticed a pattern in the text. It wasn't just writing but also included numbers and what might be coordinates. Knowing she needed expert help, Emily emailed the images to Jonathan Alder, a former classmate who was now a cryptologist and historian. His fascination with codes and hidden languages was well known, and if anyone could make sense of this, it would be him. "Hey Jonathan," she wrote, "came across something bizarre in the archives today. Can't make heads or tails of it. Any ideas?" She hit send, not realizing that her discovery was about to unravel a mystery that would challenge everything she knew about history, reality, and herself. As she waited for a reply, the library's shadows seemed to deepen, a silent whisper echoing through the stacks, hinting that some pages were never meant to be found. Jonathan Alder was in his cluttered study, surrounded by stacks of books and papers, when he received Emily's email. His interest piqued immediately. The images attached to the message depicted symbols and scripts he'd only encountered in theoretical texts. He recognized elements that hinted at a connection to ancient esoteric traditions, possibly even touching on the occult practices of the Renaissance that blurred the lines between science, magic, and mysticism. "Emily, this is fascinating," Jonathan typed back, his fingers flying over the keyboard. I'm seeing components here that resemble astrological symbols mixed with what could be a form of ciphered Latin. Can I come to see this in person? Within hours, Jonathan was navigating the labyrinthine halls of the university library to meet Emily. The excitement was palpable as they greeted each other, their shared curiosity forming an immediate bond stronger than their occasional correspondence over the years since graduation. As Emily led Jonathan down to the vault, she briefed him on the manuscript's mysterious qualities, not forgetting to mention the odd sensation of the illustrations seeming to move. I might just be overworked and imagining things, she admitted with a hesitant laugh. Jonathan listened intently, his mind racing with possibilities. Don't underestimate your instincts, Emily. History is full of accounts where truth was stranger than fiction, especially in matters like these. In the dim light of the vault, Jonathan examined the manuscript. His eyes widened in awe as he traced the symbols, muttering various hypotheses about their origins and meanings. See here, he pointed, these symbols are not just decorative. They're strategic, each one placed with intention. This manuscript, it's a grimoire, a book of spells, or an alchemical text, perhaps. The implications of such a find were enormous. If Jonathan's initial assessments were correct, the manuscript was not only a historical artifact but also a potent tool that had once been in the hands of someone very powerful. Using his phone, Jonathan took high-resolution images of the text and illustrations. I need to run some of these through decryption programs I've developed. They're designed to recognize patterns and historical ciphers. Back at his study, Jonathan worked deep into the night, his software parsing through the complex layers of the manuscript's contents. The program began to reveal a partial translation that suggested the manuscript was indeed more than just scholarly work. It hinted at hidden knowledge, possibly detailing rituals that could manipulate natural forces. Simultaneously, Emily dug into the library's archives to uncover the provenance of the manuscript. Her research led to obscure references in the library's acquisition logs from the late 19th century. The manuscript had been part of a collection donated by an anonymous benefactor whose estate was said to have contained numerous occult artifacts. As days passed, the duo pieced together a compelling picture. The manuscript likely originated from a shadowy figure of the Renaissance, possibly connected to the legendary Hermes Trismegistus, often cited in texts of that era for his supposed creations of Hermeticism which influenced alchemical thought. The more they uncovered, the more Emily and Jonathan realized they were unraveling not just a historical document but a Pandora's box. As knowledge of their research spread, they noticed unsettling changes. Shadows lingered longer in the library corridors, and whispers echoed off the shelves, as if the quiet space itself reacted to the manuscript's secrets being disturbed. One evening, as they discussed their findings in hushed tones in the library, a chill wind swept through the room despite the closed windows. The pages of the manuscript fluttered as if caught in a gentle breeze, stopping on a specific page that detailed a celestial alignment that occurred once every few centuries, the same alignment due to occur in just a few days. Jonathan, do you think it's a coincidence that we found this manuscript now, with the alignment so close? Emily asked, a trace of fear in her voice. Jonathan looked at her, his face serious. I don't believe in coincidences, Emily. Not with something like this. Whatever is written here, it's meant to be used, and soon. We need to decide our next steps carefully. As they stood together, the weight of their discovery pressing down upon them, they understood that deciphering the manuscript was no longer just an academic pursuit. It was a race against time to prevent history from potentially repeating itself in unforeseen ways. As days turned into nights filled with relentless decryption and research, the atmosphere around Emily and Jonathan grew tangibly heavier. The library, a sanctuary of knowledge, began to feel more like a stage for an unseen drama unfolding in the dim light among the towering bookshelves. Emily found herself jumping at the slightest noise, the rustle of turning pages making her heart race unusually. As she and Jonathan delved deeper into the manuscript's mysteries, it was becoming clear that their work was disturbing something that perhaps should have remained undisturbed. One evening, while reviewing their latest findings, Emily glanced up to see a shadow flit past a distant shelf. Her breath caught in her throat. Jonathan, did you see that? She whispered urgently. Jonathan looked up from the manuscript, his expression skeptical. "See what, Emily? There. Someone's here watching us," she murmured, her eyes scanning the dimly lit aisles. They quickly gathered their notes and cautiously approached the area where Emily had seen the movement. The only sound was their own footsteps echoing softly on the library's marble floor. As they rounded a corner, they found nothing but the usual rows of ancient tomes. Jonathan looked at Emily, a question in his eyes, but she shook her head, puzzled and unnerved by her own reaction. "Maybe it's just the stress getting to me," Emily admitted, trying to laugh it off. But her laugh sounded hollow in the silent library. They decided to leave for the night, but as they walked toward the exit, Emily felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Turning abruptly, she caught a glimpse of a figure disappearing behind a shelf in the distance. This time, Jonathan saw it too. "We're not alone here," he said quietly, his usual skepticism overridden by the weight of their experiences. They hurried out of the library, the heavy doors slamming shut behind them with a sound that echoed ominously through the empty building. Back in the safety of Jonathan's study, they discussed the possibility that their research into the manuscript was drawing unwanted attention, possibly from individuals or even remnants of the ancient occult society mentioned in the manuscript. "We need to be more careful," Jonathan advised, locking his front door and drawing the curtains. "Whatever secrets this manuscript holds, they're valuable enough to have kept hidden for centuries. We might be stirring up something dangerous." The next day, they returned to the library with a new sense of purpose and caution. They began setting up surveillance cameras around their work area, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever or whatever was taking an interest in their activities. As the solar eclipse approached, the symbols in the manuscript began to resonate with an eerie relevance. The text seemed to describe astronomical events as triggers for certain rituals that were meant to harness cosmic energies. The coincidence with their current celestial conditions was too precise to be ignored. "This isn't just academic research anymore, Emily," Jonathan said, his voice low. "We might be on the brink of something that's both historically significant and dangerously powerful." Their next step was to set a watch for the night before the eclipse. They equipped themselves with everything they might need: cameras, recorders, and even protective symbols from the manuscript that Jonathan insisted they wear as talismans. The night grew deep and dark, the library a labyrinth of shadows. Emily and Jonathan set up their equipment in the main reading room, the cameras angled to cover all entrances. As midnight approached, the air grew inexplicably colder, and a soft, almost inaudible whisper seemed to drift through the stacks. Emily clutched the talisman, feeling its surface warm against her skin. The cameras flickered momentarily, and then, on one screen, they saw the outline of a figure robed in darkness, its face obscured, moving with purpose through the library. "We've got something," Jonathan said, his voice tense. "Let's go." They moved cautiously, following the figure at a distance, cameras recording. As they turned into a secluded aisle, the figure stopped and turned to face them. Its eyes gleamed unnaturally in the dim light, a cold smile playing on its lips. "You should not meddle with things you do not understand," it said, its voice a chilling echo that filled the room. Before they could respond, the figure vanished as if it had never been there. Shaken, Emily and Jonathan checked the footage. The figure was there, captured on video as it spoke to them. "We need to figure out what this is, who they are and what they want," Emily said, her resolve hardening. "And we need to do it before the eclipse. We're running out of time." As dawn broke over the university, the manuscript lay on the table between them, its pages seeming to thrum with a life of their own. The forgotten pages were forgotten no longer, and the shadows they had stirred were now reaching out into their world. In the wake of their eerie encounter, Emily and Jonathan found themselves delving even deeper into the history surrounding the mysterious manuscript. Their research took them beyond the confines of the library and into the annals of the city's forgotten archives. Here, amidst the brittle pages of history, they unearthed evidence of an ancient society once steeped in celestial observations and arcane rituals, seemingly resurrecting after centuries of dormancy. The society, known as the Fraternitas Saturni, had vanished in the shadows of time, their practices deemed too controversial and dangerous for the evolving modern world. The manuscript, it turned out, was not merely a collection of arcane knowledge but was believed to be a tool for celestial alignment and manipulation, crafted by the society's most enlightened minds. This explains the interest in the manuscript, Jonathan noted as he examined old letters and documents that mentioned the society's sudden disappearance. If the Fraternitas Saturni is resurfacing, they might believe that the upcoming eclipse is the right moment to reclaim their power or fulfill an ancient prophecy outlined in these pages. The intensity of their situation escalated when Emily received an anonymous email warning them to cease their investigation or face dire consequences. The sender claimed allegiance to the society and made it clear that Emily and Jonathan had unwittingly interfered with plans centuries in the making. "This isn't just about academic curiosity anymore," Emily said, her voice thick with anxiety. "We're dealing with something that could be very dangerous." Determined to understand the full scope of what they were dealing with, they decided to seek out an expert in esoteric societies. Dr. Miriam Elcott, a retired professor known for her studies on occult practices and their impacts throughout history, agreed to meet with them. In her quaint home, surrounded by books and artifacts, Dr. Elcott listened intently to their story. After examining the photographs of the manuscript, her expression grew grave. "You've indeed stumbled upon something extraordinary," she acknowledged. The Fraternitas Saturni was no ordinary group. They believed in the power of celestial events to bring about change on Earth. If they are indeed resurfacing, the eclipse could be central to their plans. She advised them to be extremely careful, suggesting they use discretion and possibly seek protection. "Such societies can be very protective of their secrets," she warned. Armed with new knowledge and a growing sense of responsibility, Emily and Jonathan continued their investigation, now with the cautious guidance of Dr. Elcott. They pored over historical accounts and artifacts, connecting dots that painted a worrying picture of the society's capabilities and goals. As the date of the solar eclipse drew near, the urgency of their mission grew. They learned through their investigations that the society might be planning a ritual that would use the manuscript to focus celestial energy, a ritual that could have unforeseen and possibly catastrophic consequences. "Whatever is going to happen, it's going to happen during the eclipse," Jonathan concluded, marking the celestial event on their calendar. "We need to find out where and stop it." Their next step was to track down the current members of the Fraternitas Saturni. Jonathan's skills in decryption and cybersleuthing led them to an encrypted chat room where conversations alluded to the upcoming event. They weren't able to pinpoint exact details, but the chat confirmed their suspicions that the ritual was imminent. With every piece of the puzzle, the gravity of their situation became more apparent. Emily and Jonathan prepared to confront the society, to prevent them from completing a ritual that had unknown but potentially devastating implications. They gathered evidence, tools for disrupting arcane energies, and anything else Dr. Elcott suggested might help. The night before the eclipse, the tension between preparedness and the unknown was palpable. Emily couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to her like a second skin. But alongside the fear was a resolve to protect the unaware world from the shadows that stirred beneath the surface of history. As they equipped themselves for what might come, the forgotten pages of the manuscript seemed to whisper in the quiet of the library, a silent testament to the power of knowledge and the depths of human curiosity. Emily and Jonathan were no longer just scholars. They were guardians standing at the threshold of a forgotten world, ready to face whatever lay beyond. As the solar eclipse approached, Emily and Jonathan realized they needed more concrete information to prevent the potential catastrophe hinted at in the secretive exchanges of the Fraternitas Saturni. They decided to turn their research outward, tracing the historical landmarks and artifacts mentioned indirectly in the manuscript which they believed were clues left intentionally by past society members. Their first stop was an old museum in the city, home to a collection of astronomical instruments from the Renaissance era. They met with the curator, who was intrigued by their interest and shared tales of unusual donations made by anonymous benefactors over the years, many associated with occult figures. Emily and Jonathan examined astrolabes, sextants, and old celestial globes, looking for symbols or inscriptions that matched those in the manuscript. After hours of meticulous inspection, They found a small celestial globe with similar engravings hidden in the seam of its base. The globe, when aligned a certain way, projected a map on the wall. The map highlighted specific locations around the city, locations that matched some of the cryptic references in their translated texts. "It's a treasure map," Jonathan realized, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and dread. These locations could be where the society has performed rituals in the past, or they might be where they plan to enact the next one during the eclipse. With the map as their guide, Emily and Jonathan visited each location, documenting and searching for any sign of recent activity by the society. Their journey took them through ancient cemeteries, abandoned churches, and even into the catacombs beneath the city, where they discovered frescoes that depicted celestial alignments and shadowy gatherings. In one of the catacombs, Emily found a hidden alcove with a statue of an angel whose eyes were inlaid with a dark stone that shimmered under their flashlights. Behind the statue, they uncovered a collection of old manuscripts and artifacts that had clearly been used in ceremonies. The items were covered in the same symbols found in the manuscript. "This is recent," Emily noted, examining candle stubs and chalk markings that were not weathered enough to be old. "We must be getting close." They photographed everything, taking care not to disturb the site more than necessary, and decided to set up surveillance to see if members of the society would return. As the night before the eclipse wore on, Emily and Jonathan, equipped with night vision cameras and recording devices, watched from a safe distance. Hours passed with no sign of activity. Then, just as they were about to give up for the night, shadows moved through the catacombs. Figures robed in black converged around the alcove, beginning what appeared to be preparatory rituals. Emily and Jonathan recorded everything, careful not to make any noise that could betray their presence. The robed figures were too focused on their ceremony to notice anything else, allowing Emily and Jonathan to capture clear audio and video of their preparations. Realizing they had gathered enough evidence, they quietly retreated from the catacombs, planning their next steps. They needed to alert the authorities, but first, they wanted to ensure that their findings were indisputable and that the imminent threat was understood. The morning of the eclipse, they met with local law enforcement and presented their findings, explaining the potential danger of the ritual and the historical and supernatural elements involved. Skeptical but alarmed by the evidence, the officers agreed to intervene. Armed with the knowledge of where and when the society planned to meet, Emily, Jonathan, and the police set out to stop the ritual. They arrived just as the eclipse began, the sky darkening, and the stars appearing in the daytime sky, giving the city an otherworldly feel. The police moved in, detaining the robed figures who were too engrossed in their preparations to resist effectively. Emily and Jonathan watched as the society members were taken away, the manuscript safely secured by the authorities to prevent any further misuse. Relief washed over them as the sun re-emerged, the light dispelling the darkness of the eclipse and the shadow that had loomed over the city. They had prevented a potential disaster, their courageous efforts supported by the diligent decoding of the forgotten pages. Reflecting on the events, Emily felt a profound connection to the past, realizing that knowledge, whether hidden in shadows or illuminated by the light, always had the power to change the course of history. As she and Jonathan packed up their equipment, they knew their journey with the mysterious manuscript was not over, but a new chapter of understanding and guardianship had just begun. With the eclipse fully underway and the mysterious society members now in custody, Emily and Jonathan found themselves in the unusual position of having prevented a potential catastrophe yet still feeling the weight of unanswered questions. The society's ritual had been thwarted, but the significance of the manuscript and its powers remained largely unexplored. After the police had secured the area and taken the robed figures away, Emily and Jonathan approached the makeshift altar that had been set up in the catacombs. It was a chilling sight. An array of ancient symbols had been drawn into a large circle on the floor, with various artifacts positioned at strategic points around it. Jonathan, ever the meticulous observer, began documenting the setup with his camera. "Look at this configuration," he noted to Emily. "It's not just random. There's a clear celestial alignment represented here." They were trying to draw power from the eclipse itself. Emily, meanwhile, examined a small tablet that had been left on the altar. It was covered in the same cryptic script as the manuscript. "This looks like a recipe or formula," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the stone chamber. "Maybe it's part of what they needed to complete their ritual." The urgency of decoding this new piece of the puzzle was palpable. They decided to take the tablet back to Dr. Miriam Elcott, who had been invaluable in helping them understand the manuscript's broader implications. When they reached her home, Dr. Elcott welcomed them with a mix of anxiety and curiosity. "I saw the news," Dr. Elcott began as she ushered them into her study. "I'm relieved you're both safe, but we need to understand exactly what was prevented here." Together, they pored over the tablet and the photos Jonathan had taken of the ritual setup. Dr. Elcott's knowledge of occult practices provided crucial insights. "They were attempting to open a gateway," she explained, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "Not in a literal sense, but a metaphysical one. They sought to bring forth knowledge or power from whatever realm or consciousness the manuscript communicates with." The discussion turned to the manuscript itself. It was safely locked away in police evidence, but its secrets were still mostly locked within the fading ink and ancient leather that bound it. "We need to ensure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands again," Emily stated firmly. "Its knowledge is too dangerous if misused." Dr. Elcott agreed, suggesting they work with the authorities to create a controlled environment for studying the manuscript, involving experts in various fields to mitigate any risks. "We'll need historians, linguists, cryptologists, and even physicists," she detailed, to truly grasp the manuscript's capabilities. Over the following weeks, a multidisciplinary team was assembled, and an extensive study began under the strictest security. Emily and Jonathan were integral to the team, their initial discovery and subsequent actions having saved the city from unknown consequences. As the research progressed, the true power of the manuscript began to unfold. It was not merely a book of spells or ancient formulas as one might find in myth or popular culture. Instead, it contained a sophisticated understanding of quantum states and their manipulation. Knowledge that, when combined with certain celestial events, could indeed influence matter and energy in profound ways. "This is revolutionary," one of the physicists on the team exclaimed during a meeting. "If we can harness this safely, it could change everything we know about energy and matter." However, with great power came great responsibility. The team was acutely aware of the ethical and safety considerations in handling such knowledge. Discussions often stretched into the early hours of the morning, debates raging over the best course of action. Meanwhile, Emily and Jonathan continued to delve into the historical origins of the manuscript. They traveled to archives and libraries across the country and even abroad, piecing together the journey of the manuscript through the ages. Each discovery added a layer of understanding but also complexity to their task. As they uncovered more about the manuscript's past, they also began to understand the motivations of the Fraternitas Saturni. The society had believed that humanity was not ready to wield such knowledge, and that they alone could safeguard and eventually use it to usher in a new era of enlightenment. Now, with the eclipse long past and the immediate danger averted, Emily and Jonathan faced a new challenge, ensuring that this profound knowledge would benefit humanity rather than lead it into temptation or chaos. The task was daunting, but with the assembled team of experts and the careful, ethical approach they were committed to, there was hope. The forgotten pages of the manuscript had opened new doors to understanding the universe, and Emily and Jonathan, once mere scholars in the dusty stacks of a university library, now found themselves at the forefront of a scientific and philosophical revolution. As the day of the solar eclipse approached, tension within the research team escalated. Each member was acutely aware of the profound implications their findings could have. The manuscript not only held the potential to alter scientific understanding but also carried the risk of misuse in the wrong hands. Emily and Jonathan, at the heart of the investigation, felt the burden of their responsibility more than ever. Their work had drawn the attention of various global authorities and secret organizations, each with its own agenda regarding the ancient knowledge. Emily and Jonathan had to navigate these treacherous waters carefully, ensuring that their research did not fall prey to exploitation while maintaining the integrity of their scientific inquiry. On the eve of the eclipse, The team gathered for a crucial meeting to finalize their plans to safeguard the manuscript during the celestial event. The police had increased security around the research facility, and all communication lines were monitored for any hint of a breach. "We are not just scientists today. We're also guardians of a dangerous secret," Dr. Elcott reminded everyone as they reviewed the security protocols. "The eclipse could amplify the manuscript's properties based on what we've deciphered so far. We must be vigilant." The plan was straightforward but fraught with risk. They would secure the manuscript in a specially designed containment chamber that would shield its properties from interacting with the eclipse's energies. Surveillance would be constant, and only key personnel would be allowed access to the room where the manuscript was held. As darkness began to creep across the sky, heralding the start of the eclipse, Emily, Jonathan, and a small team of trusted researchers were stationed in the control room adjacent to the containment area. Monitors displayed live feeds from various angles, ensuring that any disturbance would be detected instantly. The moment the eclipse began, a palpable sense of unease settled over the room. Emily watched the monitors intently, her hand resting on the manuscript enclosed in its transparent case. She could almost feel the ancient text pulsing like a living heart. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a chill swept through the room. On one of the monitors, a shadow passed across the corridor leading to the containment room. "Alert! Movement detected," one of the security officers announced, and the team sprang into action. Cameras tracked the shadow as it moved with unnatural speed, bypassing security measures with ease that seemed almost supernatural. It was heading straight for the manuscript room. Jonathan and 2 security officers rushed to intercept, but by the time they arrived, the door to the room was ajar, the containment case alarm blaring. Inside, the manuscript still lay in its case, but the air was electric, the pages seeming to flutter without being touched. "It's trying to react to the eclipse," Emily realized, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to reinforce the containment field." Working quickly, the team adjusted the settings, strengthening the energy barriers around the manuscript. Slowly, the disturbances calmed, and the manuscript settled. Back in the control room, they reviewed the footage, trying to understand how their defenses had been breached. It became clear that the shadow was not a person but an effect of the manuscript itself, a manifestation of its power reacting to the cosmic alignment. As the eclipse reached totality, the room bathed momentarily in darkness, and when the light returned, the atmosphere was unchanged, the crisis seemingly averted. The team let out a collective sigh of relief, their gaze returning to the manuscript, now quiet within its containment. "This was a warning," Dr. Elcott said solemnly. "We were prepared, yet it was nearly not enough. This knowledge, this power, it's not meant to be tampered with lightly." In the days that followed, the team worked to fortify their research protocols, integrating new safety measures and collaborating with international bodies to ensure the manuscript secrets were preserved but not abused. Emily and Jonathan, changed by the events, continued their work with a new respect for the boundaries between science and the unknown. The manuscript, a relic of a bygone era, remained a beacon of uncharted scientific and philosophical territory. As they documented their final report on the incident, the words of Dr. Elcott echoed in their minds. "Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. We must choose wisely which keys we turn." The forgotten pages had opened such a door, and now Emily and Jonathan stood guard, ever vigilant, ever respectful of the ancient wisdom entrusted to their care. The final confrontation had not been with intruders or thieves, but with the very essence of human curiosity and its consequences. As custodians of this profound knowledge, they would continue to seek understanding, but always with an eye toward the potential consequences of awakening forces beyond their control.